Hello and welcome to my Liz and Patty cosplay hat tutorial. This is a tutorial to go along with a pattern I have available that will give you all of the pieces you need to assemble this hat. Thank you very much if you supported me by purchasing the pattern. I hope it's helpful and I hope this video is helpful as well. So let's get started. So to get this started, you're going to want to take a ruler and use it to mark 1.5 inches from the edge of the hat brim. And then you're going to do this all the way around the edge of the hat so that you have a guideline going all the way around. Anytime this tutorial calls for a marker, I recommend using a disappearing fabric marker because some of these markings may not be covered up by other materials by the end of this project. But moving on, next you're going to want to make more markings. This time they're going to be 1.25 inches with the starting point being this little crease where the crown of the hat meets the brim. And then once again, just do that all the way around. Now that the markings are finished, we're going to start to lay the fabric into place. You just want to move and press the fabric around until it's laying about where you want to glue it. You need to make sure that the fabric is centered and that once it's laying flat against the hat, it's going to cover up all of the markings. Once it seems positioned right, carefully lift up the middle, put some glue down, and then smooth the fabric out on top of the glue. Continue gluing the fabric down in small sections, making sure that your fabric is either covering or lining right up with the markings. The markings are your guide for where your fabric should stop being glued down, so just make sure not to go past them. You want to stay right up along the edge like this. Next, you just need to trim off any excess fabric that's outside of the markings. You may or may not have excess fabric here. When I made this pattern, I made it to have more than what I measured out to be needed to accommodate for anybody who might not be using the exact same base hat that I am and might need a little bit of extra fabric for it to fit. If you did end up with some extra, it's safe to trim it away now. Once the first half is glued down and trimmed, you're going to repeat the process of gluing on the second half, leaving a little bit loose at the edge here so we can carefully glue this down and make it as seamless as possible. You're going to want to find the middle point, kind of like this, and then just make a mark right where that middle point is on each side of the hat. Then just finish gluing down on both sides, stopping right at the middle mark. Then trim away any excess here and whatever's remaining around the edge of the hat. Once that's done, we're moving on to pretty much repeating all of those steps on the bottom side of the hat. We're once again going to mark 1.5 inches from the edge of the brim all the way around. And then on the inside of the hat, marking 1.25 inch all the way around. After that, you can glue the fabric down following the same steps as before. This side is a lot easier to do than the top side is, so I'm not going to leave in a whole lot of detailed footage here. And as you can see, my camera started to fall down at this point anyway, so there's not much to see. Next, I'm using a steamer to get out any wrinkles and just help the fabric mold to the shape of the hat a little bit better. There's no specific technique here, I'm just steaming and using my hands to press and smooth until things look neater and I'm satisfied with it. And then this is how it looked when I decided I was finished. Now I'm starting on the details. This process will be the same for all 3 sizes of fabric strips you'll have from the pattern. I'm just putting some glue down in the middle of the strip and then folding the edge over. The edge that you folded over should measure out to be around 1/2 inch. Continue this process along one edge of all of your fabric strips. Once the first edge is finished, you're going to put more glue down the middle, which should be right on top of the seam from the first glued edge. Then fold that edge over. This fold should be around 1/4 inch. Repeat until you finish this process on every strip. This is optional, but I like to go over these with some basic white stitching. I just like the way it looks as a detail. If you don't have a sewing machine, this would be pretty easy to hand sew. but hand sewing is not very fun and it's very time consuming, so if you just want to skip over this step, that would be perfectly fine. We're going to start to attach the fabric strip details now. The first pieces we're going to place are to hide the seams on the side. So I'm placing one of the shortest fabric strips along the seam and just marking off how much excess I need to cut off. Once it's trimmed to size, it can be glued down on both sides. Next, we can start adding the medium length fabric strips. This just gets glued down along the edge of the fabric. Make sure to stop and start right at the middle point where you just glued down those small fabric strips. I apparently lost a bit of footage in between here and the next clip, but I recommend taking a bit of hot glue and very lightly applying it along the tip of the fabric strips just to help keep the fabric from fraying. But anyways, when you're starting the second half of this part, you just want to very carefully lay this piece down so it's neat and aligned with the other piece to create a seamless look, especially at the beginning and the ends here. If you end up with any excess at the end, just go ahead and trim it off and then continue gluing. Repeat all of this until you've glued all of the fabric strips on both the top and bottom side of the hat, placing the longest strips on the outer edges and the medium strips in the inner edges. Here I'm just hitting it with a steamer again. I've noticed that these pieces also benefit from being steamed. Here I'm just gently pulling at the edges of all the fabric strips and checking for any areas that might need a little more glue to lay flat. The last thing we need to add is these little white felt details. To start this off, I made a small mark just to find the very center at the front of the hat so I can get this as symmetrical as possible, especially in the front. I'm marking all the way around before gluing these. For my hat, I placed 10 of these pieces all the way around, about 2.5 inches apart. On the bottom, I did 16 pieces at about 2.25 inches apart. These details will only go on the smaller circle on the crown of the hat for the top side and the larger circle on the brim of the hat for the bottom side. As I'm gluing these down on the top side, I'm tilting them slightly to the right. On the bottom, instead of tilting them all in the same direction, I place them in this kind of circular arrangement. It's kind of like rays around a sunshine, if that makes sense. If not, you can see the placement of them towards the end of this clip, and then you can use that as a reference. And after that, you are pretty much done. If you used a water dissolving fabric marker, you'll want to use some water and get rid of any markings that are still visible, obviously. I also use a lint roller to get rid of any fabric fuzz and the stringy bits from the hot glue that get everywhere. I hope this video was helpful, and thank you again if you purchased access to this video through the pattern on my Ko-fi. If you need help or have any questions, please reach out to me through Ko-fi or Instagram and I will help as much as I can. Enjoy your new cosplay. Bye!